Hello and welcome to Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I'm John Molesky, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Our guest is Jane Harman, who is Director, President, and CEO of the Wilson Center. She came to the center 10 years ago after serving 9 terms as a member of the House of Representatives, representing California's 36th congressional district. Congresswoman Harman was the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee and on the Homeland Security Committee's Intelligence Subcommittee. She resigned from Congress on February 28, 2011, almost 10 years to the day, to join the Wilson Center as its first female director, president, and CEO. And now, after an amazing decade at the helm, she's stepping down and joins us today to talk about her time with the center. Jane, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to have you here.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
So take us back, Jane, 10 years to the decision you made, what couldn't have been an easy decision, to leave Congress after 9 terms and come to the Wilson Center.
It wasn't easy, but boy, was it the right decision. It wasn't easy for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had just been reelected to my 9th term in November of 2010 and had a challenge from the left and a challenge from the right. And elections are hard in many districts, and mine was one of those. So I'm back in Congress. It is the so-called lame duck session, which is when Congress gets all its work done after the election and before Christmas, using Christmas as the shove to make people make decisions and get legislation passed. At any rate, there I am, and the headhunters for the Wilson Center called and said, we have had a long search to succeed Lee Hamilton, but we've reopened it. Would you be interested? And I remember going home to talk to my late husband, Sidney Harman. And I said, what do you think? I mean, I just got elected. He said, do it. The Democrats are now in the minority again. Congress is rife with toxic partisanship. And at the Wilson Center, you can really make a difference. And oh, by the way, Sidney and Jane Harman were honored by the Wilson Center 5 years previously. So we did know about it. And Lee Hamilton was one of my mentors in Congress, my predecessor. So that's what happened. After the new year, I interviewed at this search firm and I was selected. And then it was hard to say goodbye to the people who voted for me, who were very upset. The people who didn't vote for me were thrilled. But my colleagues were and are very important to me. And
so that's what you miss, the personal relationships.
I miss
but I'm
the
guessing,
people.
Yeah. But I'm guessing you didn't miss the partisanship and the bickering.
I don't miss the partisanship. Somebody said that my DNA is bipartisan, and my DNA is bipartisan. And I just feel that my politics, my view of policy fit well at the center because it is, as Lindsey Graham called it when I was talking to him about this, a safe political space where we encourage the expression, civil, respectful expression of all points of view. And I really love the times when I participate in that, or I moderate that, or I just brag about it.
Well, you have certainly led by example in that regard in your time with the center. It's been great for all of us to see you manage yourself in that manner. Clearly a Democrat, but clearly someone who's respectful and able to have dialogue with people from across the aisle.
Well, thank you. I'd make one other comment about that. It depends what you put first. Do you put your career first, or do you put your country first? Mm-hmm. I've always bragged about one of our chairs on my watch, Fred Malik, who was sadly died about 2 years ago now. Wow. But he was a card-carrying, passionate Republican who helped elect money for Republican governors. And he had worked in the Nixon administration and so forth. But he supported a few Democrats. I was one of them. And he was furious with people he supported if they didn't put country first. So what I'm saying about this is that it's sadly not a popular thing to do, because it's often a recipe for getting defeated in your next election if you are bipartisan. But it is the right thing to do. And I felt good about it in Congress, and I feel great about it at the Wilson Center.
So talk to us about your view of the role of think tanks in the equation in general, and then in particular, your thoughts on the role of the Wilson Center.
Well, the Wilson Center is not a traditional think tank, although we think, and we are a policy tank. we really are the living memorial to a president. And there's only one other one that I'm aware of, and that is called the Kennedy Center, named for John Kennedy and his devotion and Jacqueline Kennedy's devotion to the arts. This one is named after Wilson, who was a visionary in international affairs. And it celebrates the two parts of his life. One was academia. He was a longtime professor and ultimately president of Princeton University. And the other is politics. He was a governor of New Jersey, and then he was president for 2 terms of the United States. And that combination to me is of keen interest, and we uniquely have that. And so we're a think tank, but we stand apart, and we are a living memorial as much as a think tank.
And your old friends in Congress, your former colleagues, rely on the Wilson Center and other think tanks for information that fuels their thinking about public policy.
It fuels their thinking. We now have trained, in my view, over 1,000 Capitol Hill staffers. This was a new innovation in the Harman decade, but not just mine. I mean, I give credit to the team for everything we did. But we've trained 1,000 Hill staffers in foreign policy, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. And they have learned a lot from us. We also brief members of Congress, but even more interesting to me is how many call up. By the way, a fairly senior Republican has just called and said, I'd like to come down and use your platform to talk about my views of homeland security and domestic terrorism. And yeah, bring it on. I mean, we're not going to put it on as a PR exercise for any member of Congress, but we will put on a balanced program where this person has to subject himself or herself to questions, and where since this is a Republican, we have a Democrat participating. And also, by the way, diversity and inclusion matter to us. This is a big deal. We have a diversity and inclusion council, but we try to display diversity in our programming and our panels.
Yeah, then the safe space that you've created, or the Wilson Center has created, where people feel that they can come and have we're kind of the opposite of the Twitterverse, where it's all kind of craziness being thrown back and forth. You come to our place, you can have an intelligent discussion.
I don't tweet, or maybe it's smart, but I don't. I mean, my Twitter is used as an important tool at the Wilson Center, and some people are very good at it. But in my view, I'm much better off in more of the traditional form of communication.
So when you think back, Jane, I'm sure that for you, I mean, I came to the center months before you did. So my 10 years plus matches your time. And I know for me, it's been a blur. I'm guessing similarly for you, it's gone very quickly. But what are some of the things that stand out? Are there accomplishments that you're most proud of? Are there moments that will resonate with you for the rest of your life? What do you think about?
By and large, it has been a wonderful life experience for me. And you might ask, why am I leaving? I'm sure that's the next question. Because it's been a fulfilling decade, but I think I've got one more chapter in me to do something, and I better get on with it. And I also feel very proud of the accomplishments, but having fresh blood is never bad for an institution too. So I'm excited about Mark Green, my successor, whom I've known for quite a while, who also served in Congress, overlapped with me a period, but then did other things that are highly significant. And I think especially his work at AID will be enormous, and at IRI will be enormously helpful center. So what do I think about? Well, let me start with my introduction there. At my farewell from Congress in the Capitol, hosted by Steny Hoyer, the then Speaker of the House, John Boehner, came walking by, and I was flummoxed because, usually these things, they're not partisan, but the Speaker of the House from the other party would stop by my farewell. And so I stopped speaking and said, the Speaker of the House is here. Would you like to say something? And Boehner, in his style, sauntered up to the platform and said, I just want to thank Jane Harman, who served in Congress for the right reasons. And that has never left me. He touched me deeply. And what I am hoping people will think at the end of this decade is I served at the Wilson Center for the right reasons. It's a big deal to me. So let's start with the beginning, since you asked. there was an event with the then president of Mexico, Calderon, in I think my second day. And my late husband, Sidney Harman, joined me. I still have a picture of this. It was the only time he saw the center and my office, because a few days later, he wasn't feeling well. He was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and he lived 1 month. And why I'm telling this story is to explain how wonderful the center was. I kept coming to work. We did stuff. He wasn't that sick until he was. But when he died, the entire Wilson family, and that is my word for the place, just rallied around me. And I stupidly came back to work a day later and was in this daze for a while. But the love, the support that we have for each other is palpable. And I don't know another institution that is that way. And I see you nodding, and it's marvelous. And people get sick, people have had COVID, people are, whatever. The cycle of life happens to people, and the Wilson family is there for people. So,
well, and having seen it from the inside, I could say that, you make that point time and time again. Particularly, you've made that point during this pandemic that people first, family first, and you consider the center a family, and you've been the #1 cheerleader for that idea.
Well, thank you. If I'm remembered for that, if that's the right reason to have been here, then I'll take it. Some other right reasons, and I feel great about this, are to transition the place from kind of the abacus and paper into a sleek modern machine. I mean, we literally had paper time cards. I know some people don't even know what that means. Paper time cards. And the Wilson Quarterly, which still is a first-in-class magazine, was printed only and mailed with stamps to a small universe of people who were over 80 years old. That's not fair, but that was the idea. And now it is interactive, online only, award-winning, superb, modern communication, and it reaches much, much younger people. That's going to be our universe for the future. And we do social media. We have a state-of-the-art website, and your programming has evolved. I'm sure it has. And we get your wonderful, I know I shouldn't disclose this, but this wonderful news summary in the morning for staff only. Maybe I'll be entitled after I leave if I
absolutely. You've got a lifetime subscription, I promise.
A lifetime subscription. Cost is right. But anyway, we've transitioned to that. Another thing that we did that I'm proud of, but again, it took a village, was to align our scholars. We've had 5,000 scholars over our 52 years of existence. We were formed by an act of Congress. Align them with our programs. Why should we do that? Well, there's lots of scholarship in the world that is of interest, but if we want to create a boombox for the Wilson Center that showcases the things that we really know about and do well, why not put those scholars right under the programs? And we have done that, and we have streamlined our programming so that every program we have is sustainable, meaning financially sustainable, and also staffed in a sustainable way with the support of the scholars. And then we have, in addition to creating very vibrant programs, we have promoted coordination across our programming. And you've been very helpful in this, John. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thanks
and
for the opportunity.
we now have something we call our spotlights. And I think I put the S under spotlight. So I claim
Yes, you did.
a credit for that. I want my royalties. But the point is that our programs collaborate, and we can do cross-programming in a way that's highly effective and, again, maximizes the strengths of everybody that we have at the place. And we have a couple of programs that are beyond first in class. One is our programming on the Arctic. One other frenemy, as I call them, one other think tank does programming on Arctic security. We do programming on everything Arctic. The other program we have that no one else has in this form is our Science, Technology, and Innovation program, which is responsible for teaching cyber and artificial intelligence to Hill staff. I mentioned that we do the teaching, and that does things that no one else can do on misinformation, disinformation, and the technical side of the threats we face from intrusions. And we have a big staff. It's well known everywhere, and I couldn't be prouder of the whole of the work we do there.
So, anyone who's worked for, with, or around Jane Harman will have observed what I've observed, which is this almost superhuman energy. You are the ultimate energizer bunny. You never stop. So what makes Jane run? Where does this come from? Is this tied to the whole Steny Hoyer observation about in it for the right reasons? Are you just motivated by a passion for the content, the subject matter, the importance of the issues and topics that we're dealing in?
Well, yes, I think I was born with a lot of energy. I'm not responsible for that, but I remember when California was having blackouts back sometime. Let's hope we don't emulate the Texas example that just happened, unfortunately for the millions who live there. But it was having blackouts, and the late Sidney Harman said, "I know what let's do. Let's plug Janie into the grid." And I always thought that was adorable. But you used a word that applies definitely to not just to me, but to people who ask what explains it, and it's passion. I literally went to the Democratic Convention as a kid in 1960, before your great grandmother was born, and I literally saw the nomination of John Kennedy for president, and it was, a young man, supremely handsome, a fresh voice, a fresh approach to leadership in the U.S., just powerful. And from that day, it was my epiphany. I loved not so much the elective side of politics, but the policy side of politics. And so I've done that. I've managed to shape a career with a few excursions into more of a business career as a lawyer, which I am, but mostly a career in public policy. And I love it. And so how can you not be energetic around the things that you love?
Yeah. Well, that comes through every day. So, world according to Jane, as you leave the Wilson Center and you look at the menu of issues that the center is dealing with, and the Congress and the country and the world, give us your overview of what do you think are the top challenges that face both the nation and the world?
Well, to quote my friend, and she has been my friend for 50 years, Madeleine Albright, the world is a mess. Also, to think about this, the Trump administration did some things right, and I commended the Trump administration when I felt it was doing things right. 2 examples: focusing on North Korea, although that there was no strategy behind it, we didn't get very far, and the passage of the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, USMCA, which I think really has advanced trade in our region, and the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, which I think are not the whole answer to our future role there, but I thought in the net were very positive. But what the Trump administration did wrong was to basically pull America away from alliances and pull America away from the world. And America first, I thought, was a very poor slogan and unhelpful. And now we have a new administration trying to change things, but the Biden administration can't just go back to the Obama administration. That won't work. The world is different. The challenge from COVID is once in a century. And so what do I think are the challenges? I think COVID is number 1, 2, and 3, and not just dealing with it at home and dealing with the economic impact of it at home, but showing that America is the indispensable partner in helping the world deal with it. We have the innovation. These amazing vaccines didn't fall out of the sky. That's another thing for Trump. The Trump administration did fund in Operation Warp Speed a program to develop the best vaccines, and we did that. But now distributing them domestically and internationally is a challenge, and using them to leapfrog developments like this to the digital plane, to get away from the old, analog ways in which we have done manufacturing and distribution, and moving to a digital plane is a real opportunity. So COVID, restoring our alliances, but rebuilding them. A lot of them need work. The WHO needs work. We shouldn't have pulled out. The Paris Agreement, the climate agreement needs work. The UN needs a lot of work. NATO needs work. All this stuff should absorb us as the indispensable partner, not just the indispensable country, the indispensable partner working with and supporting others. It does take a village. So there's that. In addition, there are some real tangible threats. One of them now that we understand is domestic terrorism. Understanding that threat correctly so that we either don't lose our First Amendment right of speech to security, or we don't protect our First Amendment right of speech and not try to prevent or deter those who would harm us. Protecting both liberty and security is a challenge. It's a hard problem. It's something that I personally know about and the Wilson Center knows about. And it's in a book I'm coming out with soon, a discussion of all this. The book is called Insanity Defense. Point being that we keep trying to do the same things in defense and intelligence policy and expecting a different result. Well, we better start solving the hard problems. Wilson Center is good at that. That's a really hard problem. Just to list a few more, the threats from nuclear bad actors like Iran and North Korea, and the challenge of China. The goal is not to go to war with all these places. The goal is to have better ideas and especially in the case of China, to cooperate and compete. And even Henry Kissinger, 97 years young, whose name is on our China program, thinks that China has done some things that are very dangerous and bad and needs to be confronted, but that our smart move, and I strongly agree with this, and the Wilson Center is poised to be helpful, is to figure out how we confront China, but also how we cooperate and compete with China. And yes, we can keep three ideas in our heads at the same time.
You mentioned Mark Green, who will be trying to follow your very tough act as the new boss at the Wilson Center. I'm not going to ask you to disclose your private briefings with Ambassador Green, but what advice do you give somebody coming into this job?
Well, let me say, he brings very good experience. He might improve on my act. Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, strength to strength. But he brings a lot of skills that he has building political capacity around the world in his role as the head of the International Republican Institute, IRI, which is the brother or sister of the National Democratic Institute, NDI. They work closely together. It's a wholly bipartisan enterprise. It has been from its inception. I've been on NDI trips. In fact, Mark and I were in Ukraine together in 2015. And so he brings that experience, plus his AID work. We have not figured out yet, I think never, but now is a good time, how to showcase America's soft power in a world that is very different. And Mark, I think, will understand that, because AID is our biggest foreign aid agency that demonstrates America's generosity to the world, and how to claim credit or how to share credit and all the rest of it is something that the Wilson Center can be helpful with. Oh, by the way, AID is in the same building we are, physical building. So there's that synergy, but I think Mark will bring that very much to the fore. Mark also was briefly the head of the McCain Institute, which is a smaller but important think tank in honor of John McCain, based in Arizona. And John McCain is an example to me of somebody that we sorely miss from our foreign policy and security policy discussions. I mean, no one is indispensable. Okay, check. But he's far more indispensable than most people. And he would have the courage right now in a terribly fractured Congress to speak up and put the country first.
So Jane, you mentioned your great titled new book. It's a terrific title. And I will say publicly what I've said privately. We want you to come back when the book is published and talk to us about it on Wilson Center now. But are you willing to give us an exclusive? Tell us anything more about what you have planned in the coming months?
Well, we're rolling it out now. Why? Because it's ready. It's not going to be formally published until May, but guess what? with digital platforms, we can share with some folks. If you would like one, John, I'm sure you can get a copy of it.
Okay.
We can share advanced copies with folks. And actually, next week, I think it is on March 3rd. Maybe I'm stealing somebody's thunder, but David Sanger, one of our truly vaunted Wilson Center scholars, who's written 2 great books at the center, is going to interview me, I think at the center, or well, virtually, on the book, First Up, Out of the Blocks. So I'm excited about that. And the title, I should just tell you, did not come from me. I had a boring title picked out, but I have 4 wonderful children, the youngest of whom is a journalist. And I was telling her about this book. And she said, Mom, the title's so boring. How about insanity defense? And so what am I learning? That younger people and younger minds actually can teach old grandma here some new tricks.
Well, you've got plenty of tricks to teach as well. That's great that your daughter got to name the book. Fantastic. Well, Jane, thank you very much for joining us today. I want to ask you one final open-ended question, which is, I learned this from a 60 Minutes producer who said, when you're interviewing people, they are experts in ways that you'll never be when you're a generalist. So the CYA question is there anything I haven't asked you today that's important for us to know? So in other words, a final thought that's not based on a prompt from a question from me. Anything you want to share with our viewers?
Yes, and I actually raised this in one of these endless virtual conversations, this one involving a very old friend of mine, David Rubenstein, who is extremely well known in Washington, but who I knew as a young staffer in the Senate, along with me, a young lawyer, before he had any money, before he ever gave $1 to restore all the monuments and buy all the old documents that shape the forming of America and all the great things he's done. And that question was, and it actually relates to you too, John, and to me, the importance of humor. David is hilarious. And he said that self-deprecating humor helps him do these amazing interviews that he does. I love humor. I can laugh with the best, and I love poking fun at myself. And I keep thinking of you and me at these vaunted Halloween parties at the Wilson Center, where I am Wonder Woman and you are, who are you?
I thought about wearing the Captain America suit today for this
America,
interview,
yeah.
but I didn't think that would be appropriate.
We're the 2 funniest older people at these parties, and we laugh it up. And why does that matter? Because enjoying yourself is a huge element in politics, by the way. If you're very grouchy and very gloomy, voters are not encouraged to be interested in you. But it is also a huge ingredient of leadership. And maybe I sometimes get it wrong, but I always say I only tease the people I love. And I have really cared about an atmosphere, not of silliness. I'm not talking about silliness, but of self-deprecating humor and fun, which has made the 10 years go by way too quickly.
Yeah, I hear you talk about, I think of the notion of the happy warrior, right? The Hubert Humphrey idea.
Yeah, well, Hubert Humphrey, by the way, was one of the founders of the Wilson Center. So let's understand. And we have a Hubert Humphrey lecture, and which we should focus on sometime soon. The last lecturer was someone who gave a sober lecture, but it was appropriate, which was the difficult relationship between Woodrow Wilson and race. And we need to be clear-eyed. We're holding a big franchise here. And Woodrow Wilson wasn't perfect. There's now a series on television about Abraham Lincoln, who definitely wasn't perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. You might be perfect, but no. I'm not. And the Wilson Center has, a lot to account for and a lot to achieve, and a lot of laughter in its future. So I'm very optimistic about the place, and I'm going to stay connected. I will be President Emerita. We have the Latin phrase properly in place. And I'll be around when needed, and I'll be cheering on Mark Green and everyone else.
Well, that's great news. And, the tradition in a program like this is thank the guests for the last 20 minutes, thank the viewers for joining us. I'm going to reverse that because I need to thank you, not just for the last 20 minutes or so, but also for the last 10 years. And really excited that you're still going to be part of that Wilson family that you nurtured. Jane Harman, thank you for today, and thanks for 10 years.
Thank you, John.